right, let's do it. Well, good evening, everyone. It is great to be speaking here tonight. We're here on day 6 of the COP29, and every day's had a different theme so far. Today's was Science, Technology, and Innovation slash Digitalization Day. So there's some really neat scientific stuff going on. I also saw quite a few good presentations from the more political aspect of things, and there's been more developments all around. So we're just gonna jump into it. Um, Something very interesting that I saw today was the World Space Leaders Summit. So, in keeping with all of the different world leaders coming together, having these summits, having these meetings, discussing all this important stuff that's going on, a bunch of leaders from a variety of government agencies and private corporate space departments came together to have this summit. And it was really interesting to hear how everyone is using the space angle of things to address the climate crisis. Sometimes we think about, space activities as something that causes a lot of pollution, and that's true. It very much does. And another unfortunate aspect of it is that it's becoming, as space just in general becomes more and more available, it stays with this divide, is becoming more and more available for the richest people on Earth. And so there's definitely a lot of negative things that have to be accounted for, but there are quite a few good things that space agencies can do for the climate. A lot of work with satellites and GIS imaging and all that great stuff. And so a department called UNOOSA, the UNOOSA, very silly name if you pronounce it all together, was leading this. So it was very cool. And they did adopt a document together. So some discussions had been happening prior to this week, and the summit was the culmination of that. And so, amidst all of the disagreements and dramatic politics going on, some things are getting done, some things are reaching a consensus and agreement, and so it's really important to keep all of that stuff in mind. Um, the majority of what I saw personally today was related to energy, and there have been a lot of developments in energy that were developed and presented today. And so, if you're familiar with the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, Sustainable Development Goal 7, SDG 7, is all focused around energy, making it more accessible, making it more clean. And there have been some just fantastic developments in sustainable, accessible energy over the past few years. And a lot of those have occurred through the UN. They've had projects in Sierra Leone, getting lots and lots of solar out there, or even in Yemen. Yemen has had a massive crisis over the past few years. And there was just an emergency need for energy there, and they were able to actually install quite a bit of solar to satisfy that need in a really important way through the Yemen Emergency Electricity Access Project, or YEEAP. And that's definitely something I'd recommend you if you're interested in sustainable energy, and more importantly, you want to see how sustainable energy can be put out into the world in a practical way to really help people, not just through the climate angle, but through a social progress angle as well. Um, Definitely a very important thing to research and to be aware of. And other energy things, the US Pavilion had quite a bit going on today. Before I talk about that too much more, Michael, do you have any thoughts you'd like to share before we get into the pictures and stuff?
No, I'm so excited about my pictures today that I'm ready to fire them as soon as you allow me or as you prompt me. So at this point, I'm thinking about are just my images because I saw some. I don't want to quote you, but I saw some really cool stuff, especially in the Singaporean pavilion. I even normally I don't really do videos. I don't shoot videos because photography, in my opinion, is more difficult and it's much nicer. But I could not resist. I also shot few videos there because some of the tools that they had that it had to be recorded over a video. So I'm sorry that I don't have any better comment at this point, but I'm just waiting for you. I'm all ready to get started on my images. So at this point, no, nothing else.
All right.
Sorry.
All right. Well, with an introduction like that, I think we have to go ahead and get started with your pictures and with your videos. Got a little extra treat tonight.
Well, in that case, I'll take over and let me just share my screen. And I'll be starting my photo presentation today, as usually, on a bus, on the shuttle bus from metro station to COP's Blue Zone, because you meet on the bus every time there is someone interesting. Like I said yesterday, I traveled with the Taliban guys. The day before, I traveled with the Israeli delegation, and today I noticed the gentleman on the left-hand side with the red hat. And I thought that I have seen that head before. So I had it a look, and then I realized, of course, I know this gentleman. His name is Fadel Wadeh, and he's a waterkeeper from Senegal. And maybe 2, 3, 4 years ago, we attended the COP with what together we did these streams with Waterkeeper Alliance, and Fadel was one of our guests. So then I remember that I actually shot some videos of him previously. So that was a now nice little meeting with him. And by the way, when I went from COP back on the shuttle bus tonight, I sat together with a gentleman from Fiji, and he definitely was a rugby player because I hardly could sit next to him. He was so white. So every single trip on a bus from COP or to COP is a little adventure because you always experience something new. Now, when I entered COP, first I went to these little booths, which are just behind the main entrance, and I walked around, and I realized that this year the booths are organized in specific sections, while in the previous years, as far as I remember, they were all mixed up together. So this year it's a little more organized. I walk and talk with few of the booths, participants or the people who were stuffing them, and what surprised me that were 2 or 3 related to the nuclear energy. So nuclear energy is definitely a topic at this COP. But it was Saturday, and it was Saturday morning, and I asked the staff there, and they said it was very slow this morning, and they expected that it was going to be very slow the whole day. So I did not spend there that much time and moved on. And as I walked through the corridors, I ran into the Senator Markey, but I'll get back to him a little later since I had, and I mean, I had met him before, and I met him today a few more times later on. I walked to the pavilions, and today, as was already mentioned, was the Science, Technology, and Innovation Day. So I was very curious what was going on and where else to start it, what pavilion such a day than in Science for Climate Action Pavilion. And I have to say that the presentation I attended, the first one, that started at 11 o'clock, was probably the best one I have seen so far during the whole COP. It was the panel was there were maybe five or six panelists, all of them scientists, very highly educated, and I sat there for full 90 minutes and just could not stop listening because it was so interesting. So I just wrote down a few of the topics that they discussed, and that was really something. So the topic was related to the land use changes or emissions created by land use changes, and which part is anthropogenic and which is not. And it was kind of complex. But what seems to me the take home message for me was that they discussed the various difficulties with the data collection and how the methodology should be defined. In some countries, forest is considered this. In other countries, forest is considered that. So they have difficulties with the methodology. They also openly admitted that the data they work with and the results they provide are not perfect, but they work with various ranges because they simply cannot provide the specific and concrete data because that data is not available. Yeah, well, they admitted that they might be making mistakes. So compare that to any of the politicians who are at COP. That was very amazing. I also wrote a note, a quote what they mentioned. Let me just find it, and it goes as: "We are dynamic as scientists, so is carbon. While on the policy level, the processes are so much slower, where everyone has to agree to every little thing." And they didn't say, but it was obvious that they were kind of frustrated. And they also mentioned that they prepare these scientific reports, and then the policymakers, they just like the status quo. They don't really want to change anything, and it's so difficult to. These scientists spend so much time and so much effort on preparing these reports, and then the policymakers, they want just very simple results that they can understand. So they were also discussing that they need to prepare better and more understandable report, so people who don't have these high university degrees can also understand that. And the very last note about this specific presentation was I just realized that land use is just one subtopic from the assessment report that the IPCC prepares. And when I saw how much effort is put in just into this single in this subtopic, then it's amazing how much work is being done to prepare the whole AR report. But then there was this pavilion, and it was actually one of the highlights of the day. Then I walked around a few of the other pavilions, and I was surprised that there was nobody in the European Union pavilion. I walked there 3 or 4 times, and it was empty all the time. So there was just a big screen with Ursula for the lion in a looped video. It was played over and over. Not sure why that happened, but that was what it was today. And here is another highlight of today. That's the I'm sorry, it's Indonesian pavilion. I'm sorry, it's an Indonesian pavilion. I saw that they had these desk there, and they have these circles, the green circles, and I did not really understand how that works. So I let the gentleman explain it to me, and he said that they got an inspiration in the Iron Man movie. The technology is similar to what you can see in the Iron Man. So I have never seen Iron Man, so I did not really understand it at first. But basically, you take these circles, you put them on this desk, or they call it smart desk, and then you basically just move around, and it brings up various images and videos. So you work with that smart screen, and it's not very difficult once you have the technology in place. Then putting there the various content is pretty simple. That's what they explained it, how they explained it to me. That was definitely a highlight of my day because I felt kind of like in an Iron Man movie. Uh, Given the technology and the technology and innovation days, there were some 360 videos of the virtual reality. We have seen it many times before, so nothing really that new to me. But these are images from the Togo pavilion, and I'm pretty sure that these girls or the ladies were using it for the first time because you can see it in their faces how amazed they were that they experienced something in the virtual reality. Not all pavilions were as busy like those I have shown so far. This one is Ghana, and I think the only innovation they had there was that the black box on the left-hand side, it's some sort of a booster, and it seemed like they were playing karaoke there. There was nothing going on. So the innovation was probably a karaoke at COP. I'm sorry for this gentleman. I just couldn't help it. I had to take one more image here over his shoulder because he was just preparing some presentation last minute. So the innovation he was using was just copy paste. But I felt really bad, so moved on and went to the Portuguese pavilion. And when I saw the expression of the gentleman on the right hand side, I knew something was amazing. Something amazing was going to happen. So what in the Portuguese pavilion, they had this surf, if you would, the surfboard, and you could basically virtually surf there. So you could, as it says, immerse yourself in the giant wave of ocean protection. There were not so many people waiting there in the queue, so I waited for this Azerbaijani lady to experience it. So she stepped on the surfboard. She got the 3D glasses, also some sound, and they placed also the fan in front of her, so the experience would be not just 3D, it would be probably 4D. And then she surfed around, and when she's finished, I think it was worth it. She looked like she has the greatest time ever because there were simply she definitely enjoyed that. I moved right next to this Portuguese pavilion was this Chinese pavilion. There was some Chinese technologies, and some of it looked like I did not even know what it was. So I asked the stuff there, and the thing on the right-hand side, the bluish thing, it's actually a modem, which is portable, and it should work in about 170 countries of the world, and it's also a power bank. So the Chinese gentleman asked me if how do I get connected? How do I get online here? So I explained him I bought a local SIM card, and he explained to me that that was not necessary. If I had this tool from them, it would work here. So immediately he asked me that I get connected through his modem. It worked, and I don't know whether if I get a spyware in my phone or not, but it worked. So I will definitely check this technology because that seems like something very handy to have a modem with you like that. He wanted to have a selfie, so I took a selfie with him as well. But very interesting stuff there. And one more thing, one more pavilion is the Thailand pavilion. They do not really attract people or invite people on innovations, or that's what I saw. But they just use in Thailand. There is this baby. I don't even know how to pronounce it. The baby hippopotamus or baby hippo in one of the Thailand zoos. And here there's a copy from porcelain copy. The name of the baby hippo is Mudeng, and you can take an image and actually a photo there. And there was hundreds of images of various participants with this baby hippo. So I don't know if it's a new technology, but it's a definitely an innovation how to invite people in. So after these and maybe few more pavilions, I went to the Kyrgyz one, where they have this traditional yurta and sat there. That's the traditional house that the herders use, and sat there for a minute, but it was too busy. So I walked to the Uzbek pavilion. Just wanted to sit down in their tea house alone and have a few minutes of being alone. But I was immediately approached by this Azerbaijani girl, and she wanted to have selfies with me. I don't really know what for reason, because she didn't speak any language that I could understand. But we ended up that selfie is the same word in English and Russian and Azerbaijani. So selfie is probably a very international word. So selfie at the end of the day in the pavilions. But I thought enough in the pavilions, and I moved to the plenaries because I thought, well, let's check just the plenaries. And I was surprised there was not much going on there. Actually, there were no official meetings. There was this demonstration. So today, the demonstrants, there were none in the corridors, but they went to the plenary, to the smaller plenary. Uh, it was the plenary is very large, and the protesters could use probably 10% of the space, and the rest was closed for them. So there was few hundred of them, but they definitely could not use the whole space, and there was a lot of security there, and you could not just leave that specific space. And these are just some images from the protests. It seems like the small little protests we have seen in the previous days. All these small groups just gathered together in this plenary today, and they were there all together. I believe this is the last image from the group protest, but nothing new comparing to the previous protest during the previous days. Uh, just few more images when the protest in the plenary ended, then the protesters moved in front of the plenary, but that was about it. And at the end of the day, I walked to the US Center, or to the US Pavilion, and saw there that there was the big crowd, and obviously I knew why what was the reason for that? Because there were the two U.S. senators, so it would be the Senator Markey and Senator Whitehouse. Uh, they are probably the champions on the climate change issues in the U.S. and the crowd was pretty large. So I took few images there. I could not really listen. I did not listen. I'm so sorry because when I take images, I just my mind goes blank and I just take images. So I don't really know that much what they talked about. Maybe we can discuss it later. But I just took images. And when I went to check if the images were okay, I stepped out of the room, and I just looked to the right hand side, and I saw that there was the UN security guy. So that's the guy on the right. In the middle, there is an American lady. She's the staff of the US pavilion. And the gentleman on the left-hand side, he's from the Russian Federation. So they had there some talk. They discuss. I did not want to listen to them. I know what they talked about, but that would not be polite to mention it. But it was kind of an international experience that the Russia and the US, they got together and talked together. And I believe this would be the last image of the day, since on the previous day, the hero of our show was John, being on the Uzbek national television. I believe the hero for tonight is the youngest member of our team, so Matthew, who met together with Senator Markey. I think when looking in Matthew's face that he had a good time and enjoyed meeting Senator. That would be from me all for the images. I hope I met your standards. And with this being said, I'm turning back to you.
All right. Well, Michael, again, thank you so much for those pictures. Always the highlight of these. And well, as much as I'd like to take your title of the hero for tonight, I have to say the real hero that people are probably going to walk away from this thinking of is going to be Moo Dang. I mean, I don't know if you're on the Moo Dang side of the internet, but man, is she popular nowadays. I didn't even know that she had a statue here, but you can bet I will be making my way over to her on Monday. That's so funny. But it's good to see all that. Good to see the good energy going on today at COP. I'm also very glad that you showed those pictures of the demonstration. We've talked about the ones that have gone on a little bit this week, and it seems like that's definitely the largest one that's happened yet. So it seems like there is some momentum building up in the demonstrations, even if they are still quite limited. You know, we discussed the other day that they're not allowed to mention any countries by name, any corporations by name. And they're usually kept to be pretty small, pretty quiet. And like you said, today they had a very specific area which they could, um, a very specific area in which they could do the demonstration. So it's interesting to see that there's definitely some momentum building up even within the constraints. So that's very cool to see. Um,
I just
but
want
yes,
to mention maybe one
go.
more thing. I look at the faces of the people who demonstrate there, and I realize that some of the people I have seen them in several demonstrations. They just attend
Mm,
demonstrations of various groups, but they are the very same people. I already recognize 3 or 4 people that go to demonstration for Group A, and in 2 hours later, you've seen them in a demonstration for Group B, and at the
mhm.
end of the day, they are demonstrating for Group C. I don't know yet what that means. I don't know how to interpret it. I'm just pointing it out that I noticed that earlier today, that some of the faces appear in all of these demonstrations, and they are probably some sort
Mhm.
of group organizers of these demonstrations.
Definitely, yeah. There could certainly be some group organizers going on. I actually um something else that I can definitely say goes on. A few people that I met earlier this week who are involved with a couple of different organizations. None of them, only like one or two of them active here. But I was just catching up with someone I met the other day today, and as we walked by one of the demonstrations, he just said, "Oh, I think I'm just gonna get on this action." I was like, "Okay, I gotta go this way." So there's definitely, in addition to if there's any like inter-organization, planning going on, there's definitely at least a few people, at least one that'll just see a demonstration and go, "Hey, that looks cool. Let me hop into it." So certainly just an interest of people that are here is definitely probably part of it. Um, But yes, with the pictures that you showed and the one at the end of me starring with the senators, that was a very impactful presentation. And I actually watched two in the US Pavilion. The first one with Senators Whitehouse and Markey discussed a wide range of things. And to quote Senator Whitehouse directly, I think the main topic of that session was to, and I quote here, get those damned emissions down and solve the underlying problem, which is always nice to see something just laid out in straight terms. And the two of them talked about quite a few different things. Senator Whitehouse, he did a little talk on the different stages of climate change in the public view of things. And a point that he made I really appreciated was how there's kind of three pretty distinct phases you can distinguish the climate into, and that it started out as mostly climate science, where scientists were saying, hey, this stuff is going on. We should be aware of this. We should do more research into this. And the second phase was of climate policy, where there was quite a bit of political momentum for a little bit. Um, and occasionally it was even intersectional momentum. And Senator Whitehouse mentioned how when McCain had his candidacy, he had a pretty decent environmental platform on that list. And the senator traced it back to 2010 as to where the climate science and politics really had to split apart. Because in January 2010 was when Citizens United was passed, which gave fossil fuels, pretty much unchecked spending power to get into pretty much unlimited spending power to get their way into politics. And so it's definitely important to understand how all these different things are going to link together. But past all of that, White House described the third phase of climate science as climate as an economic force, which is not something you think about a lot, something at least I certainly don't think about a lot. But there's two pretty important truths to recognize. One of them being that renewable energy is pretty much just the cheapest option out there for energy. I mean, solar energy is just on so many levels just a better choice for consumers. And through that a better choice for producers to make. It's just cheaper. And that's a pretty new idea. It used to not be the case, but renewables are an economic force to be reckoned with. Um, and so fossil fuels is, provided that business, directs in a sane way, which could go either way. Fossil fuels just need to be phased out from a purely mathematical standpoint, and that's important to recognize. Um, and I'm getting lost in my notes here. Oh, here we go. And I said there were two important truths. The second one being that no matter how much we or our friends and family and stuff profess to care about climate change, uh, insurance companies really care about climate change. And this is a very important angle to go down. I found this a very important angle to go down when discussing climate change topics with people who aren't really up in that world that might not understand the science quite yet, might be choosing not to understand the science quite yet. But the fact is that insurance companies are worried about climate change, and my home state of Florida in the U.S. They're kind of pulling out of Florida. They're raising rates. They're pulling out. It's not a good scene there. And as insurance companies pull away from the areas, mortgages will follow. The less insurance, the less mortgages you can find, and when all of these things happen, property values can collapse, and there's very much a chance of a nationwide economic shock like we had in the late 2000s. And so climate change on its own and an unchecked form is a very negative economic force. And so when you take that versus these renewable energies that are a very powerful and a positive way economic force, and all of the other sorts of things that come along with the sustainability movement, it just makes mathematical sense to go in a more sustainable and a more climate friendly direction. and whether policies will catch up with that, whether corporations will allow policy to catch up like that, that remains to be seen. Um, and so that's going to tie into one more thing that I really would like to mention, that I think kind of illustrates some of the this distaste, I guess, around the things that are going on around at this COP. We can see that it's just the better choice, not to mention necessary to save our lives, but the best choice to go in a more renewable energy direction. You would think that policy would catch up with that, and a lot of countries want to at least appear that way. They want to say, yes, of course, let's move in this direction. But does it always go that way? And of course, the answer is going to be no. And so, one example, not to take too many pages out of Azerbaijan's book and to go after a particular country, but I think this one example is just pretty emblematic, and that's going to be of New Zealand. So currently, New Zealand's delegates are very much advocating for a phase out of fossil fuels, which is good to see. You want world leaders advocating to phase away from fossil fuels. Um, but in New Zealand's case, it's an energy here at COP that is in no way reflected back at home for the New Zealanders. There's currently a 2018 ban on new drilling in New Zealand, and so they can't start any new drilling projects for gas and oil. And that's a great thing to have, and definitely something for the legislators here to brag about. But back in New Zealand, they are planning to end that ban, to repeal it within about a month. So from the same country, you have representatives here at COP29 saying, yes, no more fossil fuels, let's get rid of them. And then you have people from that same nation back at home going, you know what? Let's get more fossil fuels. Let's take away these regulations and start drilling more. So two very opposing sides coming from the same governing body. It's a very complex situation and definitely something worthy of discussion.
If I just may offer one sentence before you probably wrap up, you went with your example all the way to New Zealand. Well, I think you could have just gone back home because we all know how the election ended, and we all know what is the new administration position relative to the Paris Agreement. So I am still not certain what to think about the U.S. delegation here, about the U.S. pavilion, because with one administration kind of ending its term and the next one coming up, we still really don't know what is going to happen. So the New Zealand example was very nice, but I think we could have just go with the U.S. and the outcome is very similar, and even the timeline is very similar. In about a month or less than 2 months, there will be some big changes, and who knows how that will play out relative to the COP29 outcomes. But on the positive side, there is a day off at COP tomorrow. So just like all the participants and the delegation, there is one extra day to think about what will be the next position. And with that being said, I'm turning it back to you again for, I guess, for the final wrap up.
Awesome. Yeah, well, you bring up a very good point. I mean, for an outsider with no knowledge to look in at the U.S. pavilion, you'd see it and go, "Oh wow, what a sustainable country! Look at all of these renewables that they have going on. How progressive are they?" But we just elected Donald Trump back into the presidency, and so those are two things, perhaps even worse of a discrepancy than in New Zealand. Those two things don't exactly go together always. Um, and so it's definitely difficult sometimes to reckon with the amount of greenwashing that is going on at this conference that you would hope would be a beacon of trust, but that isn't always the case. Um, so definitely a lot of mixed perspectives and um, a lot of opposing words and actions are being presented. And I think today that was very, very um, today that was definitely relevant. Today that was visual, that was visible, excuse me. So um, interesting to see, to say the least. But as you said, Michael, tomorrow is the day of rest, so I know I'm looking forward to that. It'll be nice to take a break from the negotiations and the politics, and at least in my case, a bunch of head-spinning science that I don't understand, but still am super interested and invested in. Um, a mixed bag as always here at COP29. But I'm looking forward to tomorrow, and I'm absolutely looking forward to next week, which will bring, a whole new slate of topics to be discussed and presentations and negotiations. So my hopes are high, even as it seems a lot of things might be kind of counteracting that. My hopes are definitely still high for this conference. Um, any closing words, Michael?
No, I think you wrap it up really well. So, just
Right.
like you, I look forward to that one day off when we can sort of take a deep breath, and think about what we experienced during the whole week, during those 6 very intense days, and think what to expect during the next few more very intense days again. So that would be my final remark for the day. And tomorrow, I believe we will have no stream, so we will probably be back on
Correct.
Monday night.
All right. Well, thank you for that. We'll go ahead and close this broadcast out. Thank you to anyone who was watching, and we'll see you all